Hello, everyone. I want to play a game. The rules are simple. You will watch Saw, the movie, and you will discuss it, or this studio will become your tomb.
That's all I got. That's all I got,
That
guys.
was fine.
I was chilled to the bone.
Yeah. Well,
Quaking in my boots.
yeah, so this is every horror movie on Netflix. We're watching Saw. We're talking about Saw this week.
Why are we talking about Saw? Maybe we should explain that.
Well, the genius among us spun the wheel of death, and it picked... Why did you choose Saw, Elizabeth?
Because here's why. I'd never seen it. I'm tired of everyone being like, kind of reminded me of Saw, and me not having any idea what
For
they
the
were talking
record,
about.
you have never heard that from me.
No, not from Steve.
Okay.
Also, I feel like lately, with a lot of movies, we've been all sort of like, screw it, maybe cue it, And so I was looking for a movie where I knew at least two people would be vehement viewers.
Well, you might only get one.
Vehement.
I'm here.
Who were the two?
I thought you liked it.
Oh. Well, we'll get to that.
Well, anyway,
I'm going
and
to
I
keep
wanted
everyone
to
in
see it.
suspense.
So
I
this
wanted
was
to
your
see it. It's a
first
big-
time.
You're trying to rig the rating system,
No, it's a
basically. is
big
what you're
horror
doing.
movie franchise. I just thought whatever. If Bob on the street like Saw, then maybe I'd like Saw.
I appreciate this because of the films available. I feel like this movie is kind of essential to understanding what modern horror movies are like, and you've never seen it.
That's
so
true.
I totally understand your curiosity.
Thank you, Steve.
But this movie is gross, and I dislike you for forcing me to watch it again. Love you.
So what did you think? I mean, this is your first time
Watching Saw, yes.
watching Saw.
Well, I don't think it's time to give my ratings, but I will say, number one, that I thought it was unique. And number two, it struck me for much of it as more of like a action movie than a horror movie. Because there's lots of action movies where you're trying to solve a puzzle and I don't know, it didn't
Like a thriller.
A thriller, yeah. It struck me as like a thriller movie where time's ticking down, we gotta blow up the Death Star, that kind of thing. It wasn't horrific until a little bit later.
Yeah, there's a lot of police procedural stuff.
Yeah.
Which is a lot more interesting than how the police procedural stuff tends to play out in the 7 subsequent movies.
That's including Jigsaw,
6
right?
subsequent movies, yeah. Including... No, it's 7.
Oh,
yeah, it's 7.
with Jigsaw,
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah, we got Saw, Saw 2, Saw 3, Saw 4.
In a way, this
Saw 5.
retrospective is timely because I think Jigsaw came out, last week or the week before?
It came out several weeks ago, but recently. And
Yeah.
I saw it, and it was amazing. It was Halloween time. If it's Halloween, it must be Saw. And apparently, if it's Christmas, it must be Saw.
Well, and I have to say the other reason I was interested in this because I'm on a bowling league, and recently our server for Halloween Jordan dressed up as the puppet from Saw,
Billy.
and we like her, so I thought maybe I could relate to her better if I watched Saw.
She was amazing.
As did Steph Curry.
Yes,
Steph
Steph
Curry.
Curry rode
Love
into
him.
the locker room on his tricycle. It was
Love
amazing.
him.
Our server at the bowling alley, I don't know, we think she's maybe 17, maybe weighs 90 pounds. She is puppet sized, and she was dressed up as the puppet, and she had the makeup on her jaw as if she
Yep.
was a marionette, and she was wearing the tuxedo. She went all out. She wasn't this wasn't some shit she found in a bag. This wasn't some sexy Jigsaw puppet costume she found on Pinterest. This was Jigsaw cosplay.
Yeah. So
And I fell in love.
yeah, me too. Anyway,
Yeah, I was really amazed too.
Yeah.
well,
Well, I wasn't there, so maybe
Yeah.
we should
Shouldn't
Do
we
we
maybe
need to
explain?
set up this movie? Like everybody except Elizabeth had seen Saw before.
Well,
this
maybe can we
experience.
give like
I honestly
a
have forgotten
1 minute
some of the plot
overview?
details. Yeah, I mean, I think we
perhaps?
definitely should talk about the plot a bit. I mean,
if you're
we're going to be talking about the plot anyway, so we might as well like explain what's going on.
if you're the type of person who listens to a podcast about horror movies, you're probably vaguely aware of the Saw franchise and its basic premise.
Put it mildly.
Even if you haven't seen the movies, and that's one of the things about this movie, it's kind of pervaded the pop culture in a way that few other horror movies have.
It's one of those movies that, like, if you somehow haven't seen it, you feel like you've seen it because there have been 7 sequels. You've heard about it, at this point. But so maybe we should give a refresher, give a fresh take on what Saw is and what it's about.
Yeah, so 2 men wake up in a bathroom, a grimy, like, industrial bathroom that's larger than any bathroom you'd ever see in your house. Grimy is the adjective for everything that happens in
This movie looks like the film was processed in a toilet.
Yeah.
Like, it's just so pervasively disgusting.
So we have Adam, who's played by Lee Wanell, who is actually also the writer of Saw, and he's opposite Carrie Elwes, who is playing Dr. Gordon.
Lawrence.
Yeah, Dr.
It should be
Lawrence
noted that
Gordon.
he's from the UK and has a very poor American accent in this movie.
See, the
It
American
bothered the fuck out of
accent
me.
works for me until he starts yelling. Like towards the end, he's like, "You bastard!" And I'm like, "Oh shit, that's right. Carrie Elwes is British."
Yeah.
I was not pleased with Carrie Elwes in this movie, but we will get into that later.
Can I just say something funny that strikes me about his character right off the bat that I didn't really remember is when he first introduces himself to Adam, because they wake up and neither of them knows who the other is.
Yeah.
And he goes, "My name is Lawrence Gordon. I'm a doctor." It's just like the most like on the like it's super efficient screenwriting, to be fair, but I'm a doctor.
Well, it's kind of ties into what they were trying to do with his character. It wasn't well done, but I will defend that a little bit. Anyway, so they've been put in this bathroom by the Jigsaw Killer, also known as Jigsaw, who is a man who's been terrorizing the city by abducting people and putting them into traps where they're forced to kill themselves or others in order to survive.
Right.
And that's it. That's the premise of the Saw series. And then as the Saw series expands, there's like multiple motivations that get developed for Jigsaw and everything. They touch on some of that late in the movie. But yeah, Saw. View it.
I would not give it a view it, but I don't even know where to begin to talk about this movie because it's a weird experience of having seen it when it came out, not liking it, and seeing it again and still not liking it. I don't know. Did Elizabeth, this is your first time. Did anything really strike you about this movie?
Well, first of all, the traps that Jigsaw sets up are like extremely fucked up, which I think is
Sure.
what makes it a good horror movie. But there were multiple times when I'm like, how did they even think of that? Like, there's one where this woman is in like a reverse like bear trap, and if the time runs out, it like expands open and basically just rips her head in half. And it's really gruesome. I felt like the bits with Adam and Lawrence were the slowest parts of the movie.
I agree.
Does anyone else?
I felt like, so in a movie like this, I really need to care about the characters who are in peril, and I just didn't. They're so shallowly written and acted that I didn't give a fuck. I will say, though, I could not take my eyes away from this movie.
Right, I felt the same way.
You guys know I like to take a lot of breaks watching some of these terrible movies that we watch, and this one I sat through and watched the whole thing and was pretty compelled by it. I think it's like really like kinetically directed. It's kind of fun to watch, and I'd seen it before, but I couldn't remember some of the twists. But I really didn't care about the people involved. That was a huge problem.
I
for
mean,
me.
that's kind of a hallmark of the Saw franchise, at least for me. I've seen 5 of them now, right, Chris?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen 5. And I mean, it's pretty much, and I'm not really offering this as a defense one way or the other, but that's pretty much Saw. Is there's just really shitty people who are really thinly written, just really thinly sketched, getting, like, just having horrible things happen to them. Like, basically, the only person who you really come to care about or develop empathy with in the Saw franchise, at least for me, is the killer, who I guess we're in the weird position of, I guess, having to preserve his secret identity.
Well, we can
until
say-
we
Why?
get to the
This
spoiler
movie
room.
came out like, what, 12 years ago?
I mean,
we
he's
can spoil
Jigsaw.
it.
Yeah, I don't know if we have to go to the spoiler room, but we don't need to talk about it now. But Jigsaw Killer, yeah. I mean, I'm a big Saw fan, and I consider the first Saw, to be the best Saw. But really, it doesn't have a lot of the things I like about the Saw series in it. It's a little bit more of a conventional movie. But as far as the characters, I was surprised that I didn't care about these characters. But also, I think really when you're watching a Saw movie, you're putting yourself in the place of the characters.
Sure.
The characters are just surrogates for you to be like, oh no, would I be able to cut out my own eyes to get out of this trap?
But for that to work, you have to be able to identify with them at an emotional level. And the movie does try. The script feels... I feel like the script is really tight, actually. I mean, all the right like twists and things are in place. But when it comes down to like dialogue, I mean, like... So the Dr. Lawrence, right? Is his
Dr.
name?
Gordon.
Dr. Gordon.
Lawrence is his first name.
Lawrence
Yeah.
Gordon.
Dr. Gordon.
You know, he's married to his work basically, and like can't take care of his family, and he's like maybe has an affair. I don't know if we should get into that. He doesn't really, but like kind of doesn't. But like when we finally see him with his family, who we get the sense at this point that he really cares about, and like they're in peril because the killer has them captive. We see like a flashback where he's interacting with his daughter, and it's just so... I don't know, it's just so ordinary. He does like the, 10 little piggies or 5 little piggies thing with her, like playing with her toes, and it's like I've seen that in a million movies, and this scene is supposed to make me understand who this guy is and how much he cares about his family. And it was just like ripped from 100 other screenplays.
Yeah.
There were so many moments like that in this movie where it's like, here's an opportunity to like really show me who this person is, and it didn't work.
I do kind of like what Chris said, though, about how you're supposed to sort of cast, and I don't know if this is really intentional, but I feel like the Saw movies do work this way, where you are sort of supposed to project yourself onto those characters, or people and be like, oh, fuck, what if I was, unfaithful to my partner, or what if I wasn't taking care of my body, what if I didn't quote unquote value my life enough, or what if I was like, or I guess probably not a lot of people have had like a drug problem, but probably a lot of people know someone who had a drug problem. There's a lot of stuff there where you're like, oh shit, what would I do, or what would my loved one do if they were in that trap?
Well, we should mention for people who are completely ignorant of the Saw series that's Jigsaw's motivation. He's actually a cancer patient who he no longer takes life for granted, and he's pissed that you're taking your life for granted or misspending your life, and he wants to teach you some ironic lesson about not being an asshole, or you die.
Which is I'm confused as to why, like, what an interesting storytelling device to have that. Like, is he supposed to be an anti-hero? Like, I don't understand how I'm supposed to feel about Jigsaw, like, watching these movies.
I feel like Jigsaw is definitely an anti-hero.
In this movie, it's very vague because you're like, this is the setup, you're figuring it out, but the whole time I'm like, I don't care about the people who are in conflict, but I'm interested in like the specifics of the conflict, because I'm like, oh, would I cut my foot off, that sort of thing, would I reach into the toilet? But when it comes down to the killer, he's kept like he's made deliberately to be vague the entire time, and I felt like that put me at a further distance from the film as it went on.
Yeah, he's definitely meant to be scarier in this movie than the other ones. He definitely blossoms into an anti-hero in Saw 2, I think, and then for the rest of the series.
The word blossoms is so funny in this context for some
But yeah,
reason.
in this movie, he's just fucking creeping around in parking garages in a robe and all kinds of scary
Well, that's
shit.
confusing, though, because he's a cancer patient.
He can barely walk
like,
at the
how
end of
is
the
he
movie.
rigging all of this stuff up? That's what I don't
You
understand.
definitely find out a lot
There
more about
are
that later.
7 more movies you gotta watch to find that out.
Well,
But no stone is left unturned when it comes to how did Jigsaw set up the trap from his hospital bed.
I feel like they didn't really think about that when they were writing Saw 1, though.
I think they did, actually. We can
They
talk
did?
about that in a bit.
All right.
Well, I just, maybe this is a stupid comparison, but I know we've talked about this before, but in a way it reminds me of Memento because they're doing flashbacks and, like, trying to put the pieces together, you know?
Yeah.
But I think where it did frustrate me is, like Chris said, and we all agreed with, you are automatically putting yourself in these people's shoes, right? Because at least that's what I was doing. I was like, fuck. Would I be able to do any of this stuff? Would I figure out the clues? But as the movie goes on, you find out that both Adam and Dr. Lawrence Gordon have just been like lying to each other and like are weirdly involved in each other's lives. And there's all these fabrications. And that kind of it lost me at that because I was like, well, then I can't put myself in that anymore.
It's too contrived.
Right.
It feels like this is like screenwriting 101. Like they're trying to like build conflict in like very specific ways at the cost of character development.
Well, like I related most to the woman in the jaw trap because I was like, that's totally what I would do and then, but with...
Wait, you would cut the guy open?
Oh, no, I mean, I would freak out.
Oh, okay.
And, I understood...
I mean, I'm not saying I wouldn't.
No, I understood her reactions. Like, that made sense. And I was with Lawrence and Adam, too, until I found out that they had all this backstory that they were hiding and all this suspicious stuff. And I was like, what? Like, this... Okay, this is just two weird people.
It really is a screenwriting 101 thing, but this movie is, like, the history of this movie is, it is literally like screenwriting 101. Leigh Whannell and James Wan, who's gone on to do bigger and better things,
Sure.
were college friends. They were in, like, film school together. They made a short, which their original short was basically just the reverse bear trap sequence and, like, that police interview that accompanies it.
I remember seeing that on the internet and waiting for it to load on dial-up and being fucking horrified. Like I was watching a snuff film or something.
Yeah. And
Is it this... Or, well, it wouldn't be the same actors because it's fucking Danny Glover. Is Shawnee Smith in it?
I don't know. There's a chance, but I don't think so. And then they, expanded it to this feature-length movie. But this is their first feature. So you have, one of the actors is the writer, and it's his first movie, which I think is the one thing I'll cut Cary Elwes on, because I thought he was... People have been telling me that the acting in Saw is terrible for years, and I never believed it until I just rewatched this one. I'm like, yeah, this acting's really rough.
In the last 20 minutes, Cary Elwes, I laughed the entire way through it. He's basically like Tim Heidecker's Casey character, who's like slobbering over himself. He's like a man child who just oh my god. We'll get into it.
Pure intensity. But when Cary Elwes is playing opposite Danny Glover or like the little girl or something, I thought he was doing not a great job but a better job.
Serviceable.
So I think maybe it's just that Adam and Leigh Whannell did not really know how to act, and he wasn't really holding up his end of those scenes.
I thought Leigh Whannell was better than Cary Elwes, for sure. I mean, he's clearly a novice, but, like, Cary Elwes, like, trying to do an American accent and trying to be intense. I mean, one thing about a movie like this is, like, it gives an actor... They're confined in one room. It gives an actor the chance to, like, go through every emotion possible. I feel like that must be attractive to an actor like Cary Elwes. Mm-hmm.
Whannell came off more genuine, I would say, for sure, or more believable or something, definitely, to me.
It feels a little bit community theater at times, but like he seemed to kind of like own, as the movie went on, he seemed to kind of like own the limitations of the space and his own range. And Cary Elwes eventually just goes off the fucking rails.
Yeah, I mean the basic concept of them being locked in the room and slowly being delivered clues and tapes and whatever. There's a dead guy laying in the middle of the room. Like that whole basic bottle episode sort of concept is pretty interesting, actually.
I want the whole movie to be that.
Yeah,
I don't need
exactly
anything
what
else.
I was going to say is if you wrote it well and had two good actors playing it, that could be a really cool concept.
I thought of Gerald's Game, actually, watching this movie, where it's like that's a good example of how to have something that's like totally self-contained with minimal flashbacks or cuts to things outside of the immediate situation.
Yeah.
And this movie, like with the parallel timeline, kind of threw me off. The pacing was awkward.
And you have to have a really like fine-tuned concept of the relationship and the trust between those two characters. And in the first like maybe 5-10 minutes of that movie, I forget the specific moment, but there was something where I was like, oh, I kind of understand how these guys are slowly processing who, their understanding of each other and whether they trust each other. And then there was one moment, I forget what it was, where it was just like, that everything up to this point made sense as far as how much they were trusting each other, and then it just shifts in ways that don't really make sense after that.
I felt like it all made sense for what it was trying to do, and it was very tightly written. The performances and the directing, we can get into that at some point, were problems for me, but...
I mean, we can get into it right now. It's just not great.
It's just not great. It's like, I would describe it as like hyperkinetic at times. Like, there's lots of just sort of like shots where like you're like orbiting the trap, but like there are a million cuts in that orbit.
Speed's ramped up, music's going crazy, lights flashing. You can thank probably the editor, Kevin Greutert, I think is his name, who edited every damn Saw movie and directed Saw 6, I think.
Although it's really...
he directed Saw 3D, I think.
Although it's really the least gratuitous of the Saw movies for that kind of shit.
For what it is, and like casting my mind back to 2006, I think it was fairly tasteful for this kind of movie. I'll give it that.
Yeah, I mean, I was shocked there's not very much like on-screen gore. Like some of the the most gruesome moments in the movie are sold without you seeing anything graphically violent, and just through performance and editing and intensity, which I was really impressed with, actually.
Well, I'm kind of wondering about that because, so I didn't know, like, I thought this movie was called Saw because it was, like, about people's body parts getting sawed off.
You would be correct.
Which it partly is, but I also get the impression it's called that because of Jigsaw, right?
Yes, I think Jigsaw's named after
The title that's a good point.
But
Yeah.
I'm wondering about this because gore is a legitimate genre of horror. Like, that's for a lot of people horrific to see, and it's like gross. And especially for me, I was almost, I don't want to say disappointed because I don't really want to see that, but I was it was pretty mild. And I'm wondering, like, is this as horrific as, like, are there gorier movies than Saw that are like legitimate horror movies, or is that just like gore porn, or like, you know?
Well, like, so we have Saw and then we have Hostel, which is like the Saw mentality with much more gore. I think like the gore is the focus.
Well, and the Saw movies themselves get far more gory as they go on.
Well, I
like,
mean, Saw launched a gold rush for torture porn.
Yeah.
Well, that was interesting about this movie, though, is like, for most of it, we see glimpses of other traps that Jigsaw has set up, and we just see the aftermath.
Right, we don't see it happen.
Really, the only gruesome moment that I think we see in real time in the narrative of this movie is Carrie Elwes cutting his foot off.
But we don't see anything.
You don't see that, though.
You see
I think you see the saw start to bite into his leg, and after that, it's all just his
it's nowhere
face.
near as bad as Gerald's Game.
Right.
Oh, God, no.
Gerald's Game is way more
Thankfully,
gruesome.
I couldn't handle that again.
But the subsequent Saw sequels get a lot worse. But so that's the thing. But like Saw, when it came out, people were like, "Oh my God, this is just the most gruesome shit ever."
Well, it's like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre thing. Like, I kind of want to rewatch Saw again now, thinking about this, but like, you know, that movie was like intended to be a PG rated movie because it suggests violence and doesn't show anything. And thinking back on this movie, it really doesn't show any actual violence. We see aftermath. I mean, there's the body in the bathroom that has seemingly its brains blown out.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
But
it's
even
gruesome.
that's not
it's
that
gory.
bad. I mean, you see that in action movies. You see blood. You know, 300 had stuff worse than that.
I think it's because Saw. You know, one thing I will defend the Saw movies on all counts, is they do a really good job of setting up a mood and an aesthetic, and like everything's grimy, everything's dark, everything's bleak, everything's like a little just like so. When you're suggesting violence, but you don't see that much of it, it probably feels more gruesome than it is, just because the whole movie is kind of oppressively like filthy and gross.
oppressive is a good
like the
word,
worst.
because I don't like these movies, the two I've seen, because it's not fun for me. It's just, you're in a dark place for a while with people you don't care about who are about to have like horrible things happen to them, and you're just watching the clock tick. I don't see the point. And like, there's this like sort of pretentious, like moralistic element to it with Jigsaw's motivations that is barely developed in this movie. I don't know. I don't understand the appeal.
Well, the most gruesome part of this movie is when he shoves his hand down the toilet filled with shit.
I literally almost. I wrote this in my notes.
gagging.
I almost had to go to the bathroom and vomit when that happened.
It was gross. And
I
then it's
actually
on his
felt
hand.
the vomit like enter my esophagus, and
well,
I tasted
I
it.
was mostly
It's
just
because it's related. It's relatable. I had an English teacher who used to talk about watching Die Hard, and you know it's Christmas time. We can talk about Die Hard. But he said
the
that-
best Christmas movie.
He said,
right,
you know, that
Patrick?
the part that
yeah.
gets him in Die Hard is when they shoot the windows and he has to run across in his bare feet and steps on all the glass.
Yeah.
And he says, like, I don't know what it's like to get shot, but I know what it's like to step on sharp shit or cut my
Right,
feet.
right.
And so that's why that gets him. So similar to us, like, I don't know what it's like to cut my foot off. It probably sucks.
But I know what it's like to
But,
plunge
you
a
know,
toilet.
I know what it's like to plunge a toilet or put my hands into, like, gross dishwater or, you know, something like that.
Yeah.
that struck me as so gratuitous, because he does that because he's supposed to be following his heart, and he sees a heart like drawn on the toilet tank. And my instinct, if you see a heart drawn on the toilet tank, would be to open the fucking tank, which is where the thing turns out to be in the end anyways. It's
Yeah, why
not
would you
actually
immediately
in the
go to
shitty
like
toilet.
the worst place? You'd be
Yeah.
like, let's try the easy thing, and then
Let's at least let's try the clean water in
It
the
was
tank.
all for the sake of the joke. 'Cause
Also,
he does
like,
it. He's like,
you're-
oh, I wish I had checked that first.
Yeah. Also, like,
Fine joke.
you know, the day that I'm locked in a grimy bathroom with 3 hours to live, ask me if I like make normal decisions.
Oh, true.
You know.
here's the thought about
But
this
it
movie:
would-
like the clues were so generic, like
Yes.
but. Follow your heart. That stuck with me. So Dr. Gordon is he a surgeon? What is he exactly?
He's an oncologist, and he also is a surgeon.
If he was a good surgeon, he would have made sure that body was actually dead.
Well, why would
if he
he
followed-
not?
I don't
If he
think he
followed
could
his
reach
heart-
it. He couldn't reach it, could he?
Well, I don't know.
It looked pretty fucking dead.
It looked pretty fucking.
We're not
bad,
doing a
but-
spoiler room on this episode.
No, there's no reason.
I can't believe you're skipping the opportunity to play the Saw music as we explain the twist.
Play the.
I mean,
Well-
we need to play.
Are we getting into that final twist? Because I definitely want to talk about that.
We need to
and how
play
it hit me
"Bite
this
the
time.
Hand That Bleeds."
Well, that's the thing.
during
I don't
the
know if
break.
that twist. I don't know if that twist even. Well, Elizabeth.
Yeah.
Were you shocked at the twist?
No.
Because Jigsaw is enough of a pop culture icon.
No, she doesn't know who that is. She didn't even recognize the dude. She was like, "Who
was
is
I
that?"
surprised that body was alive?
Yes.
No, were you surprised at like who it was?
I have no idea who it was.
Had you ever seen that face before?
No.
Oh. Well, it was Jigsaw.
But she doesn't know who that is.
Is he the dude who was dying in the hospital bed?
Yes, but and he's the killer.
He's in a hospital bed. How could he be the killer?
He was just in for treatment. He went
I was
out.
curious about like he seemed like he was dying when we first saw him,
I mean, he did open his like one eye creepily.
He has
but-
an inoperable tumor.
Yeah.
and he has a gross like. I mean, it's not even a goatee.
Soul
It's just like it's like a long gray soul patch that made me feel
I mean,
icky.
no, here's the problem with this movie, which I think probably is the problem with all Saw movies, is by the time you get to the twist, you're so emotionally exhausted from people
Yes.
sawing their limbs off and screaming and trying to save their family
Yeah.
that I was like, oh, and the dead guy's alive. Fine. Like, you know what?
man.
They could have
I
gotten
disagree.
they could have gotten nuked and I would have been like, okay.
That twist.
I would rather like know more about the mastermind ahead of time and get inside his head than just have it revealed at the end as a sort of a twist. It's just
I think they do a
payoff
good
to me.
enough job of setting him up for this movie. They do a good enough job of setting him up. They tell you about his philosophy just enough.
I don't like movies that are intentionally set up for a sequel, like knowing that you have to see the next chapter to fully feel invested and get more
don't know if
information.
this was.
I don't feel like this was a self-contained film.
I think it was.
I don't. It didn't play that way for me, at least.
I will say I love the twist that the body that you think has been dead on the floor the whole fucking time turns out to be the mastermind.
That's great.
I thought that was a great twist the first time I saw it. This time when I saw it, I literally got an adrenaline rush. Like my heart was pumping. I was like, oh, I'm
it
so
gets me
fucking
every
stoked.
time, even when I know it's coming. It still
Yeah.
creeps me out to see him like go up on all fours and be like,
Yeah.
As
and
I was
like rip
watching
the
it-
makeup off the back of his head.
As I was watching it, it had been a long time since I saw it. Like as I was watching, I was like, "Oh, I think this is the movie where like the body is actually like the guy's alive.
Yeah.
Like, that's the killer." And I couldn't remember, so it still gave me a thrill when it happened, but I wasn't really all that invested in it.
well, because they what they do is they set it up so you think that the Jigsaw is Zepp, who's like the
Yeah.
guy from Lost.
And who is named
Right.
Zepp? What kind of name is that? Where does that come
It's,
from?
it's a
Zepp's
unique
dead, baby.
name.
Zepp's
It's a
dead.
unique name so that you remember it, so that when you hear the voice on the tape and it says "Hello, Zepp," you know that it's him. If it had been like Billy, no one would remember.
Hello, John.
John is Jigsaw's
That's
name.
Jigsaw, yeah.
Oh.
And I can't wait. You know, they did Saw, Saw 2, Saw 3, Saw 4, Saw 5, Saw 6, Saw 3D, the final chapter. Then just now they did Jigsaw. The next one needs to be called John Kramer. Which
I mean, here's
Jigsaw's real name.
I mean, here's the thing that did bother me about the twist this time is that twist is there basically just to have a twist. Like, what's the practical reason for him
And
to
why
have
was he
been
laying
laying
there the
on the
whole
floor
time?
There's no reason
Well,
for him
he
to have
likes
been
to
laying in the
watch.
middle of the
He
floor.
likes to watch. But yeah, no, it's silly. They thought of the twist and then they thought of the movie.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's actually the truth.
Yeah, the whole thing is very contrived.
Yeah.
It feels like everything is set up around that twist to make that happen and make it be impactful without any sort of emotional component whatsoever.
No
which
emotional component.
Which I don't think hit me the first time I saw it. I think the first time I was just so caught up in the like, oh, kind of moment that I didn't question it. But this time I was like, That doesn't make sense.
If you're looking for emotional components, you're not looking in the right spot when you're in the Saw franchise. Let me explain why I love the Saw franchise. Very little of it has anything to do with what we see in this movie. But basically, as the sequels go on, they keep coming up with contrived twist endings, which are always effective, even though they're not like emotionally deserved. But I'm always like, oh, they got me again, these sons of bitches. And also, very quickly in the series, it becomes a soap opera where, like, they're going back and there's flashbacks and they're retroactively changing everything you saw before, and, like, Jigsaw has all these apprentices and the apprentices are fighting. It just becomes a gory soap opera. And the traps and everything like that, I could give a fuck about.
I mean, it really reminds me of comic books. I love comic books, and even more so than something like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where you have that long-form storytelling over multiple movies. It really, really reminds me, especially just because of all the retcons and the way you go back and fuck with the timeline, and, oh, this movie actually took place in between this part of movie 2 and this part of movie 3. It's all just super kind of nerdy, playing around with narrative structure shit.
Batman dies, Batman comes back to life, some random guy takes Batman's cape, that guy gets fought by Batman. You know, it's a lot of the same kind of shit. That said, this movie plays it a lot more straight, and I was surprised at how much I actually did not like this movie this time around. I still think it was fine, but, like, the first half of this movie was a drag for me. I got invested in this movie at, like, the midpoint where they kind of set the stage, and then they show you, like, Danny Glover in the, like, hotel room, and he's got his, like, vendetta going on, and they show you at that point you see what's going on with the hostage family. I really like the scene where the hostage taker, Zepp, is the stethoscope and the gun, and he's
oh, no, dude.
Oh, you don't like that?
It's too much. Like, you know, if you're gonna threaten a kid in that way, threatening kids just doesn't go over with me.
I didn't think he was threatening the kid. It was just like
he was pointing the gun at the mom and the kid, just like waiting to see like her heart rate change. The kids weren't in danger.
It was clear that he was just like curious and fucking with them, like with no empathy.
That was fucked up in the wrong way.
Interesting take. I haven't seen that in a movie before.
I don't.
It was fucked up, and it wasn't earned at all.
I don't think that you should be able to do that to a woman, and like especially a child. And I always think to myself,
it's a movie though. It's a movie.
Yeah, but I
right?
always think to myself, man, you have a 7-year-old kid actor. Like, even if you're like, oh, Anna, it's okay, don't worry. Like, if there's an adult crying next to you and a man with a fake...
were there. Their kids were probably having a ton of fun. I made a movie. I put a 7-year-old girl in a coffin and closed it.
Well, dude, she's probably in intensive therapy right now and is trying to commit suicide.
You talk it through. She was stoked. Yeah, and actually, the girl that was in our movie, she was stoked. She thought it was awesome. She wanted to get in the coffin. We had to talk to her dad about it more than anything.
Yeah.
Look, when you're casting a movie like this, you're trying to find people who are okay with whatever you're going to put them through during the movie. So, like, I
just didn't like it from a narrative standpoint.
No, I didn't need to see him with the stethoscope and hearing the heartbeat, you know, with the adrenaline.
It was an interesting touch. I liked it. To each his own.
Sure.
Well, I guess I'm not really sure about the puppet and why that was used.
Yes.
I didn't get that.
I really wanted to bring this up because I'm used to Billy. I'm used to the puppet as part of the franchise. Like, he's just there.
The puppet is named Billy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there are really...
not brought up in any of the movies.
And there are really dumb reasons given later on for, like, how Billy came to be and shit. But especially in that first movie, it's just like, what the fuck? What? Okay, traps and all that aside, I can take, but why is there this, like, puppet who rides around on a tricycle by himself?
It's creepy.
Yeah, but it doesn't make any sense.
Why does Jason wear a hockey mask?
Yeah, but it's like if Jason wore a hockey mask and killed people, but then also had like a xenomorph or something. It's just like they come from two separate universes. Like, why is Jigsaw bothering with this fucking puppet?
Presentation.
I don't know. In the presentation, it's all about obscuring the identity of the killer. And this movie goes to extremes to like actually add a puppet into that equation as well. I don't like that. I prefer like Silence of the Lambs, where like you know the villain, like you see them in the flesh, you get to know them intimately.
Yeah. Well, Steve, you got to watch all 8 movies for that.
I guess, but in a movie like this, it's just I've seen this before so many times, and like I don't know. It's more interesting to me if I know who the killer is and know who their motives are. I feel like that would have actually amplified the tension. in the bathroom scene that's unfolding.
Yeah, you know what? All right, that's a good point, because I do love the twist. I love him getting off the bathroom floor, but what's the opportunity cost of that twist?
Imagine if we'd opened this movie with like 10 minutes of Jigsaw painting his motivations and stuff, and then we saw him lay down on the floor and pretend to be dead, and then the movie opened. I think that would make me more excited.
I'll one up you all.
That's great.
You can still have the twist where he gets off the floor, but actually know who he is, because that corpse is face down. You could know all about John Kramer and his motivations and his cancer and everything, and then at the end find out that's the dude on the floor. Like they're not mutually exclusive.
Good point.
Yeah. I mean, that's like what Hitchcock said about, like, if there's a scene where there's like people sitting around a dinner table and a bomb goes off, that's not suspense. What suspense is knowing there's a bomb under the table. You see it, they don't, and then it explodes.
Right, like imagine if we had known that was the main killer dude, and like we had no idea when he was going to wake up or what he was going to do.
I think that would stop us from putting ourselves in the situation.
Yeah, it wouldn't have made the experience of those people being like chained up so visceral and gross. I think,
and you would be waiting,
which is fine, because I don't want to experience that. That's awful. I don't like these torture porn movies. I don't want anything to do with that. Yeah. I want the movie that's about the killer and not the like sticking your hand in a toilet full of shit.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the overall thing I got from this movie, and I don't want anyone to take offense from this, is that like it seemed to cater to like kind of dumb people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I felt that way too.
I was like, oh, like this movie is for people with a slightly below average IQ who are going to be like, blood, saw, people trapped, puppets, poop.
Yeah. It felt like I had a very I've mentioned this before on the show.
Chris is going to want to cut
ridiculous saying it again.
No,
it had a very like David Finchery vibe to it, like 7 or something, but like 10 years.
It's like 7 light.
10 years too late and too light. Yeah. Like it's like trying to be like the gorier version of that without any of the emotion or intellect.
I'm just shocked there weren't any boobs.
The Saw series
boobs.
is
Not a lot of
very
boobs.
devoid of boobs. There, I think, is a pair in the entire series.
Is it two from the same woman?
Yes.
Okay.
They do not get separated from her body, however, which would
was my question.
You wouldn't be surprised if they did. If in this franchise, I mean, I think it's a prurient franchise, and this is the high point, I think, for it being like mature. Like it definitely gets more prurient as it goes along.
This film pretends to like ride the moral high horse, like the killer's got like a great motive, and like I don't buy it. And again, it's too little too late. By the time I find that out, I'm like, I've put myself through so much procedural like CSI Miami bullshit.
There is some stuff that is really CSI.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, the interesting thing that I feel like is emerging here is that Chris, you and I mean, obviously you love the franchise and have seen. How many times have you seen Saw before this?
Oh, I don't know. Probably 4 or 5, 6, something like that.
Chris, I don't think you're dumb. Also,
thank you.
And I had only seen it once, but I considered it to be. I thought it was the best of the series from what I remembered, and I remembered it being generally, I guess, a good movie. And I feel like we were both sort of disappointed on this watch, right?
Yeah, I was. Yeah. I think it's because, well, all right, so it depends on what your barometer is. Like, this is the Saw movie that comes closest to being a movie.
A film.
Like this is probably has the most broad appeal, this film.
And it's fairly self-contained, too. Like, you get everything you need out of the story in this movie. It sets up for a sequel, but it's all the pieces are there.
It tried to be a mystery thriller. It tried to have a couple ideas behind it, and then like Patrick said, it gets more and more just like into the torture porn as the series goes along, and then it becomes the soap opera. Now, the stuff I like about the series is all like the crazy ass stuff that they do with everything after the fact. Yeah. So this movie, I don't know, I was like, Saw, I love it, but I like what they did with it better. I like the body of work that is Saw more than the first Saw movie.
So I guess since we're not going to the spoiler room, and we can skip this or talk about it now, but I did have a lot of questions about the ending, because so Lawrence gets freaked out. He has to save his family. He saws off his foot. And then he is like, I gotta go Adam, I'll come back for you.
My family needs me.
But he appears.
Oh my God.
His voice after he saws his foot off is so funny.
Hey, you know what?
So I don't understand. It's like very
My
like
family
it's like Tommy Wiseau trying to do
I
Shakespeare.
would love to see you
like,
guys
"My
saw off
family."
your fucking feet right now and try to say some
It's
shit. I got a
hilarious because he
hacksaw
has
in the
this,
drawer right there.
He has this like constantly concerned look on his face, like my family. And then,
Guys,
like,
he
it's
does
just
have
like,
a
he's like,
hacksaw in the drawer.
oh Jesus!
For the listeners, there's a
Hold on.
literal
Can I see
hacksaw. It looks just like the one in Saw in the drawer right in front of me that
so
I just opened.
it's actually the hacksaw that was used in Saw. No, it's not. But there are Saw merchandise auctions all the time, or at least there used to be back in the day.
Can you buy like the broken hacksaw?
Also, for the
Absolutely.
listeners, Elizabeth is now testing the hacksaw on
She's
her
trying
wrist.
to see if it's sharp enough to cut her flesh.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be sharp enough. Yes.
Can I take a spin?
Steve wants to see it.
Well, okay. Ooh, sorry, Steve. I just
It's okay.
handed him the saw
See
part
if
of the
this will
saw.
come up on the mic. That's kind of creepy sounding.
It's kind of creepy. He doesn't want us to cut through our feet. He wants us to cut through the mic stands.
Well, okay. So he's like, I'm going to get help, but he appears on the verge of death.
Yes.
So plus he has no foot.
Yes.
So I'm kind of like, bro, where are you going?
And we never find out.
Well,
That's not true.
We do later in
That
the
final
series,
scene,
right?
Carrie Ellis
Maybe.
is just fucking hilarious in
And-
the last like 15 minutes of this movie.
He
Like,
is
that's
hilarious.
all I remember from that movie. He's so bad.
Well,
Yeah.
and Adam is going nuts. Don't leave me. Fuck, crying. Blah
He's
blah.
he goes pretty off the rails too.
He goes
yeah,
off- so-
yeah.
And then not dead. Jigsaw wakes up. But then why does he? I don't get. Is the game over? Does he kill Adam? I
He
didn't
says
get it.
game over.
He says
Yeah,
game
now
over.
here's
but,
the thing about-
But then why is? If
Does
I were-
Adam reappear in the franchise?
Yes, but not in a meaningful way. Basically, you just find out that he got killed.
So Jigsaw did kill him.
That's funny because Elizabeth asked me this after we finished watching the movie, and I was like, "Oh, I don't remember if he shows up. Let me look it up." So I looked up on Wikipedia, character page for Adam, whatever his last name is. I was like, "Oh yeah, he appears in Saw 2, 3, and 4," and then it says his mutilated corpse appears in Saw 2, 3, and 4, and so I was like, "Yeah, I guess he really doesn't."
No, so here's the thing about the Jigsaw traps, and I'll keep this conversation to just Saw, the one we just watched. They don't make a lot of sense. So, yeah, like, Jigsaw has the whole moral high ground. He's kind of an anti-hero, but if you actually look at the traps, like, he doesn't really practice what he preaches. He's kind of a psychopath, and that's kind of a thing that's in the movies. So, like, for example, some
I
of the
thought
traps...
he was just like a normal
Well, I mean,
sane guy.
he had a brain tumor, right? So, like,
Seemed
I
like a nice
understand
guy.
that,
Seemed
like,
like a
he's...
nice dude. He'd love to have him over.
I have a little bit of sympathy for him that, like, yeah, he thinks he's not actually killing people and he's giving people a chance, but, not really.
Well, so some of the traps, like the guy in the razor wire and stuff, like, makes sense. And then you have a trap like Amanda, where her trap makes sense, except what about the guy she was in there with? He didn't really have an opportunity
who
to
was
choose
that?
life, right? So he got kind of screwed.
Well, I think that Jigsaw messed up his dope. I got the impression that he was supposed to be drugged to death, but he somehow survived his overdose.
Oh, I doubt it.
Hold
But then
on.
Adam's trap was supposed to, like, Dr. Gordon's trap makes sense. He's supposed to kill Adam to escape the room. Okay. But then Adam, like...
What is Adam supposed to do?
His key was the key to his handcuffs was in the bathtub, and now it's down the drain, so he's basically just fucked, and he had no option. So...
I mean, I feel like they kind of refined that element in the later movies, right? I
Well,
mean,
is someone predator and someone prey, or like what?
No, I guess I just mean that Jigsaw's like purpose is clearer, and I mean, because there are traps in some of the later movies where it's like they didn't have a way out, and that's sort of the big like, oh, what's happening this time,
Right.
I mean, I just feel like it wasn't very refined, is a funny word to use about this franchise, but I feel like they hadn't like fully refined that concept or thought it through.
Okay, so let me throw a bone to any of the Saw fans that are out there, because watching this movie as a fan of the franchise, I saw something that I thought was very interesting. I always thought, as much as I like Saw, I always thought Amanda's trap, and Amanda becomes a kind of a key supporting character over the next two movies. I always thought Amanda's trap was pretty fucking easy compared to a lot of the shit people have to do in Saw. Like, she basically wakes up and she has to cut open the guy's stomach and take the key for her trap.
I mean,
No
easy
skin off her back.
but she has to kill him.
Yeah, But, like, she doesn't have to maim herself like so many of the other subjects.
She's already being maimed. I mean, we saw her, and she has fucking scars on all of her jaw.
It's true. There's no way out of that trap without being scarred.
Okay, good point. And I'm not trying to denigrate the trap, because the trap is iconic. The trap comes back in, like, every other movie of Saw. But I noticed on the wall, and she doesn't talk about this, because remember, she's giving...
But the bear trap comes back?
Yeah.
Do we ever see its effects, like when it actually works?
Can't tell you. You're not that far
I'd
yet.
like to see that kind of.
I'm very curious.
Oh, God. It's so good.
Have I seen any of the movies where it comes back? I don't remember.
Well, you see it a couple times. Like Amanda sees it in the workshop, like in Saw 3. It's brought up as a visual motif several times, but then it actually is used again in Saw 6, and it's used again in Saw 3D. Both are fucking delightful scenes. Can't wait for you to watch them next Halloween.
Okay.
But anyway,
Which we should clarify that you and I have watched one of these movies every Halloween.
If it's Halloween, it must be Saw. Yeah.
Okay, sorry for interrupting the fan theory, but I was just curious about that.
So there's paint on the wall, and it says something like, you can leave here, and it says something about losing your life. But it basically, the poem on the wall sounds like Amanda's actual test might be becoming an apprentice for Jigsaw. Because that's what she ends up doing.
I'm curious about this because you're such a fan.
Spoiler Temple.
Spoiler Temple.
And Lee Wannell, did he write all of the Saw movies?
No, I think he and James Wan were done after the first one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I was curious as to like whether or not you had a sense that like there was a master plan for a franchise.
No, I don't think there was.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't understand then. What's the theory? Just
my theory is that Amanda's trap had maybe more to do with becoming Jigsaw's apprentice than I thought, and I think this movie is actually telegraphing that Amanda is already Jigsaw's apprentice, because that would answer some things like how is Jigsaw able to snatch people out of a parking lot and crawl on all fours like real agile.
You think it's Amanda?
Yes.
Well, because she does say like, he saved me.
Right.
He helped me.
And like her... Everything we know about Amanda comes from her testimony to the police.
Yeah.
So, anyway,
Okay.
I thought that was interesting just as a fan of the franchise. But
I mean, one last note that really stuck out to me, we've been talking about how this was a first feature for these guys. The weirdest thing that I've always wondered about with this is that at the same time, it also has the biggest names of any of the Saw movies. I mean, Danny Glover is certainly a big name. Cary Elwes is, not necessarily a big name, but he's been the fucking Princess Bride in plenty of high-profile movies. It's just puzzling to me how they scored those guys. Really? Yeah, how they scored those Jigsaw. It's Jigsaw puzzling me how they scored those guys for the first installment, and then descended straight into C-list soap opera hell for the rest of the franchise.
When you have a franchise like this look at Nightmare on Elm Street. You don't need big stars after you have a hit. People are there for the name, for the the basic concept in the title. Yeah. You don't have to pay for stars. You can make even more money in the sequels by paying less for actors' salaries.
Yeah, I guess I'm just puzzled how they got those
for the first movie?
For the first one in the first place.
Well, they probably tried.
Because, Nightmare on Elm Street doesn't have anyone famous. Johnny Depp's in it, but Johnny Depp wasn't famous when he was in Nightmare on Elm Street.
Danny Glover and Cary Elwes were both, pretty washed up at this point, but they are recognizable names.
Yeah.
Danny Glover's
I don't think they cost very much.
You say that about people all the time, but it's not like you actually have actors rate sheets in front of you.
We could look it up.
Danny Glover for damn sure costs a lot more than any other actor.
Does he cost more than Sean Patrick Flannery?
If it's
who's Sean Patrick Flannery?
Sean Patrick Flannery shows up in Saw 3D.
Who is that though?
He's a guy. He was in stuff. He was in Boondock Saints, I think. He was in Young Indiana Jones. He was in Suicide Kings, my favorite movie.
After Heat. I thought that Donald Glover was in this movie and kept waiting for him to show up. Never did.
Yeah,
too bad.
That would have been cool.
He would have been a little baby in this movie.
I know. I thought maybe he was gonna
so cute.
Yeah,
He could have been Danny Glover's son.
Aw, cute.
Well, Elizabeth, it was your first time ever watching a Saw movie. Would you view it, cue it, or say game over?
I would say cue it. It seems like you perhaps gain appreciation for this movie if you've seen the whole franchise. So I guess I reserve final judgment until the end of time, because hopefully I never have to sit through 8 more Saw movies. No, Steve said this before. I was riveted. I did not check the time. I did not get up. I liked the puzzle part of it. I really like puzzle movies. I really like X marks the spot, follow your heart, glow in the dark.
It's like
paint.
Uncharted.
Yeah, it is.
Well, it's strong enough of a concept that now you have the escape room epidemic, the
Right.
puzzle room
People
epidemic.
love that.
People love that shit.
And I like that. And I would say cue it. I would say if I could give it a cue it 0.5 in between cue it and view it, I would do that.
Steve, what do you think?
I don't know. I've been wrestling with this all day because I watched this today for the second time. I would say I would give it a cue it because I did enjoy it. I would say if you this movie feels like being in a toilet for an hour and 40 minutes. So if you find yourself on the toilet for an hour and 40 minutes, watch this movie.
Go to Qdoba, then watch this movie.
No,
Yeah, exactly.
come on, we need sponsors.
It's very watchable, and it's a really interesting artifact. I mean, this movie came out 11 years ago, and it's inspired so much of what's going on in horror now. We just had a huge couple of years in horror where horror is being taken seriously in a way that probably hasn't happened since Silence of the Lambs winning Oscars, So I think Saw had a lot to do with that. I do think it inspired a lot of shit as well. It's not a perfect film. I don't care to see any of the sequels, but if you want to see a pretty groundbreaking movie that changed a lot of people's minds about horror, watch Saw. It's an effective thriller, but it's empty. Don't expect too much out of it, and you'll have fun.
I like that. It's an effective podcast, but it's empty.
Well, I'll go ahead and say I would say view it, not because this isn't the view it I expected to give. I expected to give a vehement view it, but I expected Verily to give a vehement view it. But
Like I said, this view it will never come.
yeah, but no, it's just going to be a mild view. It still holds up for what it sets out to do, I think, which isn't that much.
That's actually a good point. That's a good way to think about it. It does achieve exactly what the premise offers.
And it's just so iconic by now that if it's not in your repertoire of horror movies, you're missing out on something. So view it for that reason. And then view Saw 2, Saw 3, Saw 4, 5, 6.
We're not talking about those right now.
Saw 2 is a decent sequel. If you liked this movie, you'll probably like Saw 2.
Imagine
I'll
if the
put it in
Wheel
that
of
block.
Death lands on me again and I pick Saw 2.
I'll love you forever.
Then I'm really done.
Patrick, what do you think?
So, as I said, I remembered this as a good film for some reason, or something I liked. But then when I cast my mind back to the actual first time I watched it, I remember I didn't actually like it. It made me feel gross and dirty and just...
Like you were in a toilet.
Like I was in a toilet, exactly. Yeah, I kind of hated myself after I actually watched this for the first time. So if we're in some imaginary world where I haven't seen the other Saw movies, or Chris hasn't talked me into seeing the other Saw movies, and where I actually really did just watch this for the first time with no other context, I feel like I would probably say screw it. But that's not actually my rating, because I do also have that knowledge of the other 7 movies, or the 5 that I've seen. And it is rewarding on that soap opera-y level if you're ready to get into that. And theoretically, if you've never seen these movies before, and you're actually thinking about whether to watch them or not, and you've heard everything we've described on this episode, and you're like, okay, that sounds interesting, then go for it and watch all fucking 5, whatever. I still have 2, 3 more to go, but I'm fascinated to see whatever the fuck else happens. So I guess this all adds up to a view it. I'm going to end it with that. I'm going to say view it, even though I feel complex feelings about that.
Great. Welcome. Yeah, it's an honest movie.
Welcome.
It's an honest movie.
What are you welcoming me to?
The
Welcome
complex
to the View It
feeling.
Club.
Oh, right.
If you think you might want to see a guy saw off his foot under duress, Yeah.
watch this movie.
But you don't see it. We brought that up already.
Yeah, if
feel
you
like
would
you
like
do.
to
There's
see
a
a
vague
man
suggestion
saw off
of it.
his foot under duress, Google man sawing off his foot under duress. If you want to get that impression but not actually see it, watch that.
If you want to see Carrie Ellis go like insane and forget how to act, see this movie.
Well, I feel like more if you... I just really appreciate it best on that like comic booky level that I described before. I don't think any other fucking movie franchise does that, and I like that about this.
All right, real talk. I think the best way to explain sort of the problem with the Saw movies is the idea, the concept of Saw and Jigsaw and all that shit is more entertaining than the actual movies.
Yeah.
I do get the sense that you're thinking on a higher level than these movies. Like you appreciate what they're offering and you kind of extrapolate and like take away what you want from them, but like at their what we get is kind of a bunch of like mediocre movies with interesting ideas propelling them.
Sometimes they're hard to sit through, especially because I don't like the traps that much, but I love the mythology and I love the idea of Jigsaw. So
Yeah, I think I remember you said at some point the traps are the least interesting part of these movies.
For
Didn't
me,
you?
yeah, I would love to see a Saw movie with no traps and just soap opera bullshit.
We saw 3 and like the traps didn't make that was my big complaint. I was like, that movie seemed to be all about the traps and the traps didn't make any sense.
Saw 4.
Saw 4 and I don't know,
But
I have no
all
idea.
the criticisms are the same with Saw 3.
The trap either didn't make sense or they didn't detonate in a way that was thrilling.
Yeah.
I mean, it really, to me, is about the Jigsaw character. Because he's not really in this movie much, and you don't, like, Elizabeth definitely has not gotten an idea of, like, what a compelling and just, he's got that Hannibal Lecter thing almost, where some of the movies, he's not in them at all, he's fucking dead, but, like, his presence is just...
Most of the movies.
I love Tobin Bell. I mean, Tobin Bell is, like, where the fuck did he come from?
Where did he come from?
He's
He's
great.
just a bit part character actor. He got cast for this, which is a pretty small role in this movie.
Yeah.
You basically just need a guy with a gravelly voice to do that. And then, as luck would have it, he would have such presence to carry the character forward in Saw 2 and Saw 3.
And he just has this incredible gravitas, and half the time, even no matter how fucked up the shit is that he's doing, I'm rooting for him,
You heard it here first.
Well,
2018 Oscar Best Actor, Tobin Bell for Jigsaw.
For Jigsaw.
well,
Wait, is Tobin Bell in Jigsaw?
You'll have to go see it.
we already know who Best Actor and Best Supporting Actor are going to be. So that's
Do
a
we?
relevant
Tell me.
question. Michael Fassbender for Alien Covenant.
And Michael Fassbender
He's
for
gonna win
Alien
both.
Covenant.
He's going to win them both. That was the
No,
worst
what
take
I
I've
what
ever
I
seen.
would like to say is that to me, the premise of Jigsaw is a fantastic premise. Being angry because you're dying and you're watching people slog through their life. Great premise. Great reason to get angry. Great reason to
Teach people some lessons.
teach people a lesson. Great reason to even maybe feel a desire to kill. I appreciate that premise.
What these movies need is a sense of humor. Like if Larry Cohen, and I don't know if you guys know Larry Cohen, he did like he's a great like New York cult filmmaker from the 80s, kind of like Lloyd Kaufman, who's like the trauma guy, and he did these movies that were like social commentary but with sort of like a moralistic bent, and they were hilarious. Like he could make these movies that are like super graphic, but also there's like this like moral attitude that was taken like half seriously as like a reason for seeing all of the gore. If he made a movie like this, it would be fucking fantastic. It would be a cult classic. What we get is just something that's depressing. We've said it time and time again, it feels like just living in a toilet for 2 hours.
Yeah, the moral, they're way too on their high horse. These movies are all way too on their high horse about the whole moral
It's not even on the
element.
high horse because I don't buy the moral element of it. It just feels like a cheap tactic to keep the story moving.
I meant to bring this question up earlier with this whole moral question. Like, what did Adam actually do, and what did Dr. Gordon even do to deserve this in the first place? I mean, Dr. Gordon came close to having an affair and then decided not to have one. What was he being punished
Here's
for?
what you're
Why
supposed
were him and Adam selected?
Here's what you're supposed to think. I'm not saying it communicated this well, but if you look for it, it's there. Dr. Gordon was neglectful. He didn't personalize his patients, and he didn't make time for his family. And I think Jigsaw might have thought he was having an affair. Whether or not he was is an open question in the movie. And Adam,
I guess that's
Well,
true.
he tried. He
Everything-
actively tried to. There's a scene where he's with a prostitute, but he doesn't.
It's not a
That's his-
prostitute,
not a
it's a
prostitute, it's
student.
his student.
Oh, student. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
And,
God,
and
okay,
it seems like
embarrassing.
there's a miscommunication over why they're there, though. Like, we don't see him clearly having
Well, he goes there to have. He goes there to
he's
have an
condescending to Zepp as well.
Yeah.
Like, I think that.
I guess that makes sense.
Yeah.
Everything that Jigsaw sees of Dr. Gordon from his bed, he's basically a piece of shit.
Well, and Adam lives in like a crappy apartment and just kind of you get the impression to me that he's like wandering through life.
Well,
you
he's a
know?
millennial, so he's guilty of being degenerate.
Everything.
Yeah, I like
Right
how
off
he
the
deserves
bat.
to die because he lives in a crappy apartment
Well,
and
no,
wanders
but
through life.
he like you get the, like his apartment is filthy.
And he's an
like-
opportunist, right? Like he'll be like a private detective and take photos
Yeah.
of somebody having an affair.
His tape accuses him of being a voyeur.
Yeah.
So that is his crime.
I guess it just stands.
But
that a
Jigsaw's a
crime?
voyeur. They should be
Yeah,
best
that's
friends.
not a crime.
Like I said, Jigsaw isn't morally consistent.
It stands in such contrast, though, to most of the other Jigsaw victims, including in this movie. You know, Amanda is a much more compelling case. Amanda was like throwing away her life and didn't care if she lived or died. Like, that seems like a more compelling reason for him to do what he does to her. And certainly in the later Jigsaw movies, there are people who,
Have done terrible things. And transgressed much more than Lawrence or Adam. And I was just I kept finding myself going, wait, so why do they deserve to be here? I don't know. It just stood out because in so many of the other movies, and even in this movie, there are other ones where it's like, oh, okay, I guess I understand why this person is, at fault.
Well, it should be noted as well that I got the sense in this movie that this is the first time Jigsaw has devised a trap that involves two people. And so he needed somebody related to the doctor to amplify the tension.
That's
in
not
that
true.
situation.
Amanda in the bear claw had another dude with her.
No, but he's...
Listen,
We're
I don't
reading
know
too much
off the
into
top
it,
of
I
my
think.
head, but if you're curious about what other traps Jigsaw has done before the events of Saw 1, watch Saw 2 through 7.
Perfect.
There are flashbacks?
Yes, because they killed
so
Jigsaw
many flashbacks.
early on in the series, and so they have to make up for it with flashbacks to like before Saw.
Well, then,
And
where
during the
It's
previous
ridiculous.
movie.
It's ridiculous. It's a shit
mind-blown.
show.
He has a busy, I want to lay out the timeline because there's a busy, 6 months or something where he was just going fucking nuts building traps.
Yeah.
Maybe less than that.
Yeah.
Well, this podcast is starting to feel like a trap. We've been talking about Saw for, 45 minutes or so.
An hour and 15 minutes. And wait, my leg is chained to the dishwasher.
Oh, good thing we have a hacksaw in the drawer.
Pass the hacksaw.
Don't do it. No!
My family needs me. So what are we watching next?
Anti-Birth with Chloe
We've been
Sevigny
waiting, team. We've
and
been waiting.
Natasha Lyonne, who our listeners might remember from #horror, where they play best friends. Here we go again.
She's also in American Pie.
That's true.
Can't wait.
And Orange is the New Black.
I happen to be anti-birth myself, so I can't wait to see how this movie explores that concept.
And I think we're all big Chloe fans here on the cast.
Oh, absolutely. Chloe is one of my
Chloe is bae.
one of my big heroes.
So,
I mean, whatever.
Chris.
He's anti-birth. He's anti-Chloe.
Listen,
Wow.
I've only seen Chloe in #horror.
What?
Oh, that's
What?
it?
Yeah, so
She's bae.
She has something to make up for here.
All right. Well, we'll find out.
All right, we'll find out next week. Join us then. In the meantime, you know the drill. You can find us on social media, every platform. We're out there. AmonCast. Send us a letter. We'd love it. And, until next time.
Game over.